he said, we witnessed these amulets being carved on his chest. Now, this is very important. Remember, guys, what I told you guys? Soul first, body second. This did not manifest on his skin until his soul was back into his body. Should be understood. So watch this, guys. This is fascinating. Watchers. What are watchers? What is Enoch talking about? Watchers were your entities that were unclean spirits. They wander around in dry places seeking what? Rest. So they're wrestlers, spirits. It's all about the afterlife. So that's why, like, when you get into the Aramaic text and stuff, and you start hearing about these watchers, the definition of the watcher was wakeful ones, right? The wakeful ones, those who do not get sleep or rest.
Have you heard of the money funder's dirty secret called shrinkflation? Hello. It's like stinkflation, but it's inflation by stealth. It's where you get less and less product for your buck. But the Fed claims inflation's not the problem. Noble Gold solves this problem. You know, with a precious metal IRA, you can hedge growing prices and retire worry-free. How would you like that? You keep up with the Fed's inflation, and this month Noble Gold has given away a free 5-ounce pure silver America the Beautiful bullion coin with every single eligible IRA or 401k rollover. Learn more about the services offered at noblegoldinvestments.com and call 1-877-646-5347 today.
These were believed in antiquity to be ghosts, that they died, and that's why the text says they left their first estate. So even diving deeper, this still points back to these entities being a form of what's called discorporate consciousness, where they're disembodied. And now whenever we're encountering them, they have placed their consciousness in these grays through possession, right? So this is how they've replicated their existences. But even as far back as the book of Enoch, a lot of these different texts say the same things, but there's a small, very subtle difference. And that is the difference between Malachim in Hebrew and then Malachim in comparative religions. That's where we get angels. Again, we're still dealing with this text that they believe that these were ghosts. And so that subtle nuance here changes the whole ballgame. Because fallen angels, well, what are you talking about, right? What if we are talking about ghosts? And in that sense, is that what we're dealing with right now in the UFO abduction phenomenon?
Certainly, a lot of it could be. All of it? No, definitely not.
Right.
Some of it's our own people, like humans doing it, and pretending to be.
That's also fascinating. Yeah.
It's muddying the water. I heard a lot of stuff from different sources about how they muddied the waters when there was real phenomena going on by creating these false alien abductions and, wearing masks and
my labs and everything.
Stuff like that. Yeah. Yeah. This, though, describing the necromancy and making a deal with these entities that aren't in quite physical form.
Correct.
That would also make sense if you think about specific bloodlines that want to keep it, they're only going to marry within other bloodlines. And maybe these entities have figured out a way for continuation of life and continuation of power by using these people to continue the mediumship for them.
You're exactly right. And that's why the Apocrypha of John, the Coptic manuscript about Genesis 6, about the Nephilim, it says that from the darkness they created this species. Now, what is the darkness? Again, if we're getting into the underworld, the world of the dark, like in terms of like shadows and shadow people and everything, they believe that was death. From that dimension of death, they created fictitious life, replicas of life, things that we think are alive that are dead, or death is in them looking through their eyes at us. Now, again, in the Apocrypha of John, it says it like this. It says that at the moment of conception, they stared into their eyes, these women, and they created social skins. Now, what's a social skin? It's a body that looks like their apparition. It's very interesting. So what they were performing was a necromantic ritual that they believed that whatever man was focused upon, or whatever the woman was focused upon at the time of conception, she will birth the material image of through her womb as a child. Again, what were they doing? They reversed their apparition at the moment of conception. They started out looking like their husbands. Now that's what they're revealing themselves to be, is who they really are. Now they have a body, a child that looks like the apparition of the father. So it's fascinating. Now you have a body that it can possess, and it's the physical manifestation of its spiritual existence. You have the soul in the body now, and the body looks like the soul, right? That authored it. So it looks like its father. It's very interesting stuff. It's complicated, but it's the necromantic way they begin to replicate their life. Again, it's not the relocation of consciousness, it's the replication of their life. So what they were doing is they were stepping into the babies that they had authored. And then they existed among us, and we called them Nephilim.
So talk more about the Nephilim.
Yeah.
You're saying the Nephilim is these entities that are not physical, figuring out a way to create physical and then bring their bodies in, not aliens.
Correct. Right.
Tell us more about that.
Okay. So here's the connection that's very important to make. So when we're dealing with Nephilim, there's also a species called the Rephaim. And the Rephaim, throughout all of the Bible, was mentioned as the dead ghosts. Matter of fact, in the book of Job, Job has a question. He says, can dead things come from giants? Matter of fact, it's fascinating stuff. So Rephaim has a dual meaning. It's not just ghosts, but it also means giants. Now, what's fascinating about that is we have to look at this phenomenon in this context. We're dealing with software meeting hardware. The software is that other definition of ghost. That's what's in the giant. The hardware is the giant. Now, giants did exist, but these were necromancers. So again, it's not just that, okay, we see a lot of researchers, they'll pluck one definition, leave the other one out, and it doesn't really encapsulate what really was going on. So when we're dealing with the Rephaim, we are dealing with individuals that had lived and died and had re-existed, were reborn among us in this dimension, in this world. So let's dive even deeper. When the Ammonites went into Canaan and met these entities, these giants, they called them Zamzummim. The Zamzummim is not a concrete title. Zamzummim was the only word in the Ammonite language that described the language these entities used to communicate to each other with. It was a chirping sound, a muttering sound, a buzzing sound. Now, why is that important to understand? Because in the book of Isaiah, chapter 8 and verse 19, Yahweh describes the language of the necromancer, right? When that spirit would possess the necromancer would speak the language of the entity in them. This is very interesting. So these entities that they encountered in Canaan had the language of necromancy. They were necromancers. Matter of fact, when the Ammonites went in, they said, this is crazy, that the land is eating, devouring its inhabitants. Okay, what are we talking about? Let's look at the imagery. The land is growing and it's eating the inhabitants. Now, 99% of your scholars believe what they were referring to was the living dead, these necromancers who were literally cannibalizing and killing anybody that would come in there into the land. So that's what I believe the Nephilim are. Okay, I believe they existed. I believe they were giants. But again, we need to realize that the software of the ghost lived and existed inside the hardware of the giants. That's why they had the language of the dead. And that's why they were called Rephaim, as the dead and the giants. And I hope that makes sense. I try to tie a little bow on it because it's very deep, but that's about as simple as I can make it.
You've heard people say that in scriptures, there's something that describes the Nephilim or demons as Nephilim.
Yes.
That's kind of what you're talking about. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely right. Yes, because those bodies that they inhabited died. Huh? Right? Now they're disembodied once again. Right? So they were dead. They created a body. They stepped into that body, but that body's not going to live forever. The body died again. Right? Now they're disincarnate again. They don't have a body. Right? So if we were like them, what would we want to do? We would want to keep creating bodies. And that's what they've been doing. We would call it the hybridization program. But what I believe what they're doing is they've been taking bodies from us, using us to create bodies, and then stepping into them.
And that could explain the whole spaceship phenomena.
Everything.
And maybe there are ships that they get on, and maybe they do travel, right. But it would be more like they were just in far orbit, not even as far out as the moon, or the moon would actually be the perfect place for them to go. Yeah. The perfect place for them to go. Or underwater.
Underwater, that's a huge one. Now, again, like Sheol, according to antiquity, even in Mesopotamia, Sheol was thought to have been underneath water. They believe that's where ghosts existed. Matter of fact, that's why when you get into the Apkallu, these fish gods, these entities that were half fish and half man, they were believed to come out of the water. Now, why? Because the imagery here, it speaks of the same story. They believe these entities were half dead and half alive. The software, their consciousness was disincarnate, but they had stepped into a new body. And so that's why when the Apkallu came out of the water, they were half fish, half man. Why? Because there's another theory out there that these people believe that dead people became fish. I don't believe that, obviously, but that's the way they interpret it. And that's why they wrote about the Apkallu being part fish, part man, because they believed, again, we're seeing that hybridization program. We're just seeing it the way they described it in antiquity, right? Consciousness in a body, consciousness in a body.
Were they ever able to create bodies with technology?
We don't know. As far back as I can find them, they were possessing corpses. And then they evolved into possessing living people. So it's not like these are, I do believe they're transcendent, but we can look through the footnotes of history and see how they've evolved according to what I guess we would call technology. So like back in the day, they would pull up recently deceased people and then possess them. Or they would actually even visit recently deceased people and harvest either ova or, biological excretions from the men. They would harvest them. So what they started doing is they went from, doing those things to corpses, recently deceased people. They begin to actually involve living people. And so again, I think they're running the same programs on us, but the program's going to update its technology to our awareness of it, right? So yesterday's gods become tomorrow's demons, yesterday's aliens, today's aliens, who knows what the next program they're going to run. But they're still doing the same thing, no matter what we want to call them. And I do believe they're still going to do the same thing here in the future, which is a very problematic implication for our species.
And if they can put their consciousness into metallic objects, why not computers? Why not electricity?
This is right. And this is why I think that things like Neuralink, and I love Elon Musk, but dude, I've had these entities come over the audio on shows I've been on. Imagine how easy it would be for them to hack a Neuralink. Literally just download it. Okay, this is what I want. It would make it easier for them, I think, to really have access to us in an intelligent way, and not just them pulling us out of ourselves.
Imagine them creating a specific DNA or modifying a specific DNA and then re-implanting that DNA into others.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or using that DNA to create a species and then stepping into that species. Right. And again, that's what they did with the Nephilim, where they were present with us. They grew along with us. They grew up with us. The ghost grew up in the body. And so that's how it would survive. So when we're getting into these texts, like the New Testament says they left their first estate, I think it's highly profitable for us to understand what they're referencing. This is it. And this is amazing. This comes from James Frazier. James Frazier says that possession played a role in the afterlife, but it was not, like I said, it wasn't the relocation of consciousness. It was the replication of life. So the earliest text we have of entities, people, dislocating from their own bodies willfully and possessing other people, they're called warrior texts, where your ancient warriors would be on the battlefield and they know that they're dying, they're mortally wounded. So they would dispossess their own body and place their soul and their consciousness in someone else's. That's how they survived. So it's not them relocating their soul. I think that's one dimension of it, but we can't stop there, right? They moved from their own body because it died to someone else. And in that way, that was how they survived. Now, again, I do believe this is what the hybridization program is. Create new bodies, place our souls in the new bodies. Now, what's fascinating about that, in fact, Carla Turner had a case of a lady who she was abducted, and 4 months afterwards, she gets pregnant by this whatever she encountered in the abduction. She tells her husband, this child will not live. It will not live. So later on, it actually does. It does pass away. So then she gets abducted again the second time, and they present her with a hybrid child. She tells Dr. Carla Turner, she's crying at this point. She said, what I don't understand is the consciousness of the child I lost was in that hybrid baby. So that demonstrates, again, how they have the ability and the interest, taking consciousness, plucking it, placing it in other bodies to continue its existence. This is, I believe, this is what we're getting from the missing fetus syndrome, is them taking bodies that they've implanted through either their DNA or ours. We don't know that yet, but that's how they're staying alive.
And if you can remember multiple lifetimes in your physical body, think of the advantage you would have. And then if you have an entire network of people, even if it's just a few hundred or a few thousand or a few dozen, it would only take one in theory, maybe, but I'm seeing a few dozen here that are at this round table, maybe like 13 families, 13 times 12. So it'd probably be 144, 156, maybe 5, 6, 12. Yeah. 12 completion. Interesting. I don't know, man. That's just kind of thinking right now, how many people would it take, or how many of these beings would it take to control generations, man. Yeah. And like, you're right though, because if you had 100 years or so, like let's say 80 years, and then you died and you possess something else, right? How many times do you do that before you're basically a god? You have knowledge, you've lived enough to understand things and evolve. But so that's what I'm coming up with right now. That's my opinion on what's going on. I got to jump in. I'm sorry. I got to jump in, and I'm not trying to interrupt, but what if when they modified our DNA, and I just read something in chat. Thank you, Galago. Galago says, I was thinking of the Tower of Babel scenario. It occurred to me that the unified means of communication may have been the ability to communicate with one another telepathically. And there's a synchronicity there, because I just saw King Arthur, and I think it came out in 2017. Hey, Wasp. And they had the Tower of Babel that had to get taken down. And there was a lot of metaphysical and magic in there, and the Irish. And so what you were saying just made me think, okay, so they have to change the DNA. They get rid of telepathy. That's why we don't have the same amount of chromosomes as animals, because they've got the telepathy chromosome. Boom.
It makes sense. And this telepathy thing. Okay, let's get back to this. Yeah, back to you. This has been fun, man. I love it. Yeah, dude. So let's get back to this telepathy thing. So this fits right into the mold of what we're talking about. In Göbekli Tepe, we have what are called eye idols. These idols are found by anthropologists, and when anthropologists got a hold of them, it fascinated them because they did not have mouths. Like usually, a lot of these idols have mouths that speak because they want us to to realize this idol spoke to me. These didn't. You know what they had? large eyes. Large eyes. And not only that, this is fascinating. Anthropologists believe that the reason the eyes were made larger and the mouths were virtually non-existent is because these entities possessed a language that was spoken not from the mouth, but from the eyes and the mind. Telepathy. Now, it also makes sense because our ancestors, you go back with Tepi, they created these idols for their ancestors to possess. Boom. It's the exact same thing. The exact same thing. And however, I mean, if that's the case, though, if we're dealing with the same entities in ufology as we are in hauntology, then we've got a nasty side to these fellas. Truly nasty. Because when we get into hauntology, they're still demonstrating the same technologies, materializing, dematerializing, going in and out of walls. Like we had a case, not I didn't have a case, I'm sorry. No, Dr. Michael Lynch had a case where this orb that he had located in an alleyway, he took a thermometer laser that had a thermometer on it. It would actually take the temperature of it. He hit it with the laser and the light refracted off of it. And it was solid. But also these orbs have the ability to pass through bodies. So, you know, the technology in terms of their abilities and what we're experiencing in hauntings and in UFO abductions, they're very much similar. And again, I think that if we're dealing with the same entities, we need to start asking some very important questions. You know, again, they could be running programs on us and fitting into roles that we're giving them. And as long as we do that, then what they're truly doing is, you know, I mean, aside from the missing fetus syndrome, which we see and have evidence of, who knows, man? You know what I mean? Like how much? I mean, I do believe we have a handful of options here, and obviously implications and concepts that we know that are happening. But even then, when we're stepping into their shoes and thinking, okay, if we had that kind of power over people, over a species, then I don't think even if they were a threat, it would be difficult for us to quantify that, right? Because they're so far beyond us. We wouldn't, they're like for instance, what I mean by that is we have a potential in us of being ghosts, and they're pulling us out of ourselves. There are people that are atheists that don't believe they have even the spirit, that are being pulled out of themselves. So these entities have access to potentials in us that we're ignorant of in many cases. Now, if that's the case, if that's true, if they were a threat to us, you know, how would we even know?
You need to be able to discern. You need to know they're there. And if you can't see them, and if you don't hear them, if you don't feel them, you know, you got to take your sensory perceptions. Okay, the typical 5 senses, no, but the 6th sense, you could do all of that. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I've had some guests on recently talked about their own testimonies of what they've seen and experienced and gone through. And it's fascinating. So when you go to this, I just had a thought. What if these beings also, let's take away all of the prophecies that we've heard, all the scriptures. What if they're there because they're, you know, just like us? They're a species, they're a being, they're alive in a different way, but they have to survive through a different means. And the way that they do that is, see that? Did you hear that?
I saw that, dude. You almost got nailed, brother.
Oh, dude, he'll come land. He landed right on my bowl the other day. He wanted a pie pit. He was like just hanging out right there. I'm like, all right, man, hold on a minute. I got stoner wasps flying around me in the garage here. So cool. But anyway, where was I going with that? Like, what if they're just there and we're in this symbiotic relationship and they disguise themselves as extraterrestrials so as not to alarm us, such as
that's a good theory.
Was said by the legend of legends, Psychonauts. His name is skipping me right now. Terrence McKenna.
Oh yeah, McKenna, yeah.
You know, like we eat fish. If you're a vegetarian, you're still eating plants, and plants are alive too. All this is alive. Unless you're feeding from the sun rays, and people say they're doing that, but are they really? Like, they're like, yeah, 40 years, I just eat the sun. Do you? I mean, is that it? Really?
Yeah, right. Wait a minute. You know, it's very interesting. And the symbiotic nature of this is very unique. You know, but let's take a step back and see, what if it was another species, and what if they were making profits out of people? There's one abduction account that I recently read that was concerning. A young guy, about 22 years old, got in a bad car wreck. It's actually a motorcycle wreck, and he said his body was in shambles. He remembers leaving his body, and he said he's hovering over his body when an intelligent electricity began to suck him up. And he lands in this ship, and he sees an old man that walks up to him. And he says, he says, your body is not in the condition to survive right now. And he says that if you don't get help, you'll die. Your people, your doctors do not have the technology to put you back together again. They said, so you have two options. We can kill you. We'll let you die. Or you become our prophet, and we'll put your body back together again. We'll place your consciousness back into it, and you can live your life. But they held him over death. We'll separate you from your body, and you'll die unless you become what we want you to become. Now, here's a question that I would like everybody to think about. How many people were brilliant and brave enough in history to say, I don't want to be a prophet? And how many of them never survived the experience?
Now, who is this that you're talking about?
This is out of Beyond UFOs. By the way, I read this, not out of this. So it's all dog-eared. Beyond UFOs. Okay. I'll give you, if I could find it. I have everything underlined, but that's where I got this case, this abduction experience. This is part of their NDE portion of the book. But that's exactly what happened. And so again, I think that we need to look at a different kind of abduction that's permanent. This is Ray Fowler's work in terms of this theory here. Ray Fowler was working with Betty Luca and her husband Bob. He said that he believes that death will be the ultimate abduction. Now, what this points to, though, is that abduction could also consist of people who did not obey what these entities wanted them to do. And we never got to hear their stories, just like we heard his, right? We never got to hear them.
That's pretty spooky. Now you're like going, wait a second. Are you telling me these avatars or these beings that describe what it's like on the other side and what God is like?
Oh, yes.
Now you have to question that.
Correct. The NDE experience. Now, what is for sure, at least according to their perception, is that they were outside of their body, which we've throughout all of history, we've seen apparitions. We have cases in ritual bowls where people have experienced this personally. But again, we have to start questioning, how are we being manipulated? Are they running these productions on near-death experiences too? You know what I mean? Because like for instance, when we have abductions where these individuals are meeting their deceased relatives, you know what I mean? Is that a program that they're running on us? There was back in the day when I was a young guy, I was maybe 18. I used to sell lawn care at door to door. Hated it. Never made any money.
Dude, but I sold lawn care on the phone.
Dude, that's even worse. No, I'm just kidding. I hated it.
Holy cow, what a small world. That was a tough gig.
It was awful, man. It was awful. But I went and I knocked on this lady's door. And obviously there's a reason why I'm telling you guys this. But she opened the door. She had a scar down her skull, you could see it. And you could tell, she was disabled and everything. And I'm starting to talk to her. Super cool chick. She's like, she goes, I'm sure you want to know what's going on. I said, no, honestly, I was go talk to you about your lawn. She's like, well, I can't walk down my grass in my driveway. She goes, because doctors tell me if I hit my head one more time, I'm going to die. So I said, okay. So she really wanted to tell me about her story. She said that about 10 years ago, she said that she was driving an ambulance in the snow. She had a patch of black ice and she was ejected out of the ambulance. She slammed her head on the concrete and dissolved all the fibers that held her brain into place. And I said, oh my goodness. She said, yeah. She said, I'm very blessed to be alive right now. And I said, well, I was curious. She said, man, what was it like? She goes, well, I didn't even remember anything. She said, but she said from the event or the wreck, she said, but I remember waking up to my deceased grandfather, looking at me just like we're talking now, right? Looking at her. And he said, it's not your time. And she said, well, I want to stay here. This is better than the dimension that I come from. She started trying to her best to describe, because these definitions, they're fleeting and it's hard to describe it. But she's like, there were callers in that world that do not belong here. She said there was no pain and all of this. She's getting all these descriptions. She said, but her grandfather said, you need to go back. She said, because your children, your two boys need you. So again, we're in a different time zone here, a different dimension. He tells her, your sons need you. She said, I did not have my twin boys for like another 8 years. So we don't know that. And I think that's a dimension of study that's going to take a lot of research. But again, are we dealing with the same phenomenon? Are we dealing with entities that are playing roles? And if they are, is it for our benefit, or are they self-serving?
Both. Both.
Yeah.
I think it's also, with all the research I've done, my own personal beliefs, the way that I feel, it's like a chessboard. It's an intergalactic chessboard, interdimensional chessboard. You've got you got two sides and they're competing for dominance, yet the competition will go on forever. There will always be another game, and we're in it. And it's real life consequences. And what I've sensed during this interview, when you're talking about this, the pieces that I've put together, is it's like, it does make more sense now how a species, or how a very small group of people could control the world, especially with globalization and the internet. And if you get into the internet of all things, where you track everything real time, which I was writing about 10 plus years ago, microchips around the world, tracking not only us, but insects and plants and the activity of cars and movements, everything, even at the micro level. And then they could also catalog everything. So you could have large corporations catalog everything that is available, all the resources, and they could divvy it up amongst whatever they felt necessary, hook it up to an AI system. And we're starting to see a lot of it now, man.
Right.
It's pretty fascinating. They don't talk about this nearly as much as they used to. You used to be able to look up Internet of All Things, or these the Hewlett-Packard Central Nervous System of the Earth project, which came out, I think, in 2008, where they projected trillions of these microsensors globally. And now we're it's all BS. It's fluff buckets. It's just it's weaponized news to piss you off, no matter what you think. You turn it on for 10 seconds, you're mad. You want to go do something uncomfortable. I don't even watch
what that reminds me neither, man. What that reminds me of, though, and it gets back to the product, or not the production, the productions and what they're doing, and they're performing for us, these abduction accounts. It gets back to what's called the manufacturing of consent. Show you something you're going to believe in, get you to invest in it through just belief, or actually physically invest in, by virtue of even of saying, listen, if you don't obey us, we'll kill you. That's not, that case is not alone in its existence. We have other cases where people have been threatened with death by these entities. But again, how much propaganda are they giving us? Like with Dr. Carla Turner's cases, she had one abductee named Ted Rice. He was abducted along with his grandmother. And one of these hybrids tried to get his grandmother into a physical relationship right there on the ship in front of him. And she was obviously threatened. She goes, look, I've only known one man in my life. It's my husband. He's been dead now for a decade or so. So they said, okay. Now, again, they weaponized her belief. They weaponized her imagination. Matter of fact, they even weaponized her memory, because out of the shadows emerges her deceased husband. Now, there's only two possibilities. Either that was him, which would, give us another reason why our ancestors were believing that these entities were corpses, real corpses, or that this was an apparition that they conformed to her memory of her husband, and they used that program, right, to manufacture consent, or to get some form of response, a positive response from her. But again, this gets back to stuff, man. It's almost as if there's nothing for them to work with unless we believe it.
That's another thing
especially
I was going to say.
roles. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was going to say it a little bit differently. This is how I was going to say it when we were talking earlier. It's like their imagination,
Mhm.
their creativity.
Mhm.
Maybe they don't have that. So they use us for that.
Yeah. Almost, yeah. As becoming a projection of us, right? As a language or something. That's very good. Very good. And that's not unheard of even in nature, you know. We have fish that can go in and actually materialize in terms of, we wouldn't call it materialize. I mean, they're still there, but they would change colors according to their environment. So again, this could be a language system that they're using. I mean, a lot of people talk about how they can use AI. I mean, what if it's them stepping into roles that we give them in order for them to communicate to us? But what it does sound like to me, and this is where I lean towards, is a form of deceit. That's being deceived when they want us to believe it's a deceased ancestor and it's not. Or, you know, and they've been doing this for a while. I had one case where a remote viewer thought these entities were his guides. And then as soon as they got what they wanted from him, they nearly killed the guy. So you know,
what
there's
happened?
it's this individual that I had been I was actually working with a son who's a remote viewer, and he would leave his body and get readings from his guides. Then he would go give these readings to local celebrities and famous politicians. Well, one night he went into one of his trances. He left his body and encountered these guides, which again, this is what Ted Rice and Dr. Clark Turner's work encountered. The guides, right? We're going to give you all these great, you know, positive revelations. And when they were done with this individual, they changed their apparitions to what they really looked like, and then slammed his soul back into his body. He had a heart attack. This is the individual I talked about that had different religious amulets on his chest. But these weren't his guides, you know what I mean? His entire life, yeah.
Is that one of the photos you sent me?
Yes, sir.
Do you want me to show?
Yeah,
I'm going to show that while you're talking about this.
Go for it, man. Go for it.
Yeah, please continue.
So this particular individual, yeah, he met his guides, and one night, and this is according to his son. I talked to him on the phone about it, and he gave me some other pictures and stuff. But he said, "Yeah, man." He said, "I'm hanging out in my living room, and the next thing I know, my dad just runs down the stairs. He's incoherent, and he's sweating profusely, and he's terrified." He said, "I've never seen my dad." He said, "My dad was a tough man." But he said, as he's talking to us and describing to us what happened during his trance, yeah, he said, we witnessed these amulets being carved on his chest. Now, this is very important. Remember, guys, what I told you guys? Soul first, body second. This did not manifest on his skin until his soul was back into his body. So this right here blows demonology out of the water, because these amulets are interreligious and cross-cultural. They're not limited to one particular religious dogma. I feel they use these amulets against us almost as if it's like a mathematical equation. Yeah, so that's one of my cases, but it's a fascinating case, man. But that's what they did to him. These were not his guides. And when he found out about them, it was too late. Like they almost killed him. He had a coronary and he had to go to the hospital. So these guys are very, these are what I call the soul hunters, man. Absolutely.
I'm adjusting the color while you're talking to see if we can pick this up. And there's clearly some kind of writing underneath it.
Yes. And he has different pictures. I have a few more, a couple of them that I haven't sent you yet, that are different. There are different symbols on here. But the phenomenon here that's really interesting to me personally is that this was, did not manifest on his skin until he was back into his body. Now, this gentleman is telling me that he has Polaroid video of these scars manifesting on his dad's body. But whenever he would get back on his body, these amulets would manifest. This is exactly what Betty Luca was talking about, or at least Bob Luca, when he said Betty Luca got back into her body and her body began to demonstrate skin conditions and scarifications. There's another individual that I know, what was his name? Steve Mera. So I emailed Steve Mera about this, and I said, "Have you ever encountered this?" He said, "Yes." He said, matter of fact, the individual he was working with that had this happen to him actually died from these symbols and these injuries. This right here is unreal, dude. Unreal.
Now I'm going to say, is it all the same species? Is it all the same beings, or is it a multitude and a collection?
Right. Well, okay. I believe that the majority of them are necromancers. I mean, I'm not saying that other entities don't exist, but these particular individuals that are carving symbols on the skin, again, that's what a necromancer would do, especially if he's working with some kind of spiritual technology, right? An hierarchy of almost like not just necromancy, but somebody who would almost be like a Crowley, an Aleister Crowley, or an Eliphas Levi, or these individuals, right, who are working with different rules. I'm getting passionate now, Rex. Who are working with different rules because they're playing a different game. You know, because what I see on that skin right there, it's obviously you have a Star Daily, you have a cross, but those are different religions entirely, right? They don't even have the same definitions of demons. So what happens in demonology is it fumbles over itself because, you know, a priest is not going to go in there and try to deal with these entities with the Star of David. It's not his religion, right? Likewise, you're not going to have a Christian use the Star of David. You're going to have a rabbi use the cross. Why? Because in our minds, that their form of demonology, they're all separated. They're exclusive. Now, the way these entities are thinking, that no, it's not that they're different definitions, that they're separate religions. These entities are using these symbols in complementary, like as a way of complementing each other, like they go together in a way. And so that's why I always stress to everybody, especially people I mentor in demonology, they're playing by different rules, clearly now. We've seen that. And the reason they're playing by different rules is because they're playing a different game.
Do you have a website yet?
I'm getting it done, brother. I promise you. I'm getting it professionally done this time. You
just got so much knowledge. Now, what about social media?
Yes, man. I'm all over social media. I'm on, I just put up my YouTube channel not too long ago. And that's where I've been primarily updating everybody on my work.
Which is?
I'm on, it's just Nathaniel J. Gillis on YouTube. And it's the same username both on Facebook and Instagram. I always, usually, whenever I get something hot off the press, I can't hold it. Like I have to tell somebody about it. I'll call everybody I'm close to. Like, you got to get this. Once that happens, dude, it's going up on Instagram. Straight up. I'll have a picture and then I'll give context to the picture. But so that's where I'm at. You guys can find me on that. And I put up a recent video, at least my most recent video on YouTube. It's about some of this soul hunter stuff.
I'm going to show it off real quick.
Go for it, man.
And then when you subscribe, make sure you hit the bell and you hit all notifications, and do that on my channel also, because that way you get access to all notifications. It isn't just every once in a while. And still, even then, you got to check back daily. And then the website, I want to show off my website real quick. So thank you everybody for being here with us live. This is our live stream we're doing on the website, and then we're going to premiere this on YouTube later. So everybody seems to be really impressed with what you have to say. And then
thank you.
Look at this. I'll hit play here, and then we're in the Matrix. I'm looking at myself.
Uh-oh.
Looking at myself. You're looking at yourself, looking at yourself too.
This is getting trippy, dude.
We need to do this more often.
I would love to. I'd love to, man.
Great. And let's plan on something in the next 4 to 6 weeks, and maybe we could take some of the ancient stuff, put it together. We'll cross promote, and hopefully I'll have my audio issues fixed here. Everybody said that your audio is coming in fine for them, but for me, every minute or so, a couple seconds just disappears. So it's kind of frustrating doing this interview, right? And I'm like listening to you, and then I'm like, wait, is he still talking? No, he's still talking, but
oh man,
but it still worked out, man. It worked out, and this is great. You got an ebook.
So a moment called Man's Out, and I'm getting the Skin That Crawls out here soon, and that's just been a nightmare. So I can't wait to get that out, but it's just been, I don't know. I next time I'm going to find somebody else that's different to publish it through. And, I'm a new writer in terms of, writing. And so I'm still learning all the ins and outs of that, but I hope everybody enjoyed it. We went through some deep rabbit holes And, you know, I look forward to being back again, man. 4 weeks and whatever, you know, you can hit up Michelle, you guys can figure it out. And then, dude, we're going to have a blast, man. I always enjoy myself with you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. And keep being the change you want to see, will you?
Mm-hmm.
Hello. Thanks, everybody. You're fantastic. Appreciate y'all being here with us. Have a beautiful day. And freaking watch out.